Hello everyone, and welcome back to Fallout 76 for a special bonus trip to the Purveyor. So basically what happened here is the last couple of weeks I've been on a pretty big time crunch, and then we had really long server downtime on a day that I usually record footage. So I'm a little backed up and didn't have time to get Old Man McRib done for this week. So he'll be back next week. So I thought this week we'd just do a double dip on the RNG. So we're going to visit the Purveyor today and do some more legendary crafting on Friday. I didn't think anybody would mind a couple extra trips. So without further ado, we'll get into it. But before we do that, remember, if you like videos like this and you want to see more, subscribe, hit the like button, leave a comment, follow me on Twitter. You all know what to do. Let's jump on in and see if Mama Mumbles has any love for us today. And our first roll of the day is a Vampire's lever action rifle with faster fire rate and extra perception. So I'm not a huge fan of the Vampire's effect on semi-automatic or single shot weapons because you don't have a real fast fire rate, you're not getting a ton of health regeneration, and when you use a weapon like this, you're usually pretty far away and relatively safe, so you're not taking a lot of hits to begin with. Therefore, I'd much rather do a little extra damage. With that said, faster fire rate on this, if it actually works, could make this a bit more viable. But I've never been sure if it actually works. So before we do anything else, we're going to go ahead and test that. I have another lever action in my stash that doesn't have faster fire rate. So we'll do what we've done in some other videos and put a little timer up and see how this actually works. Oh, also the 3-star perception gives us extra VATS accuracy. That's good, that's great. Let's get to some testing. Smashing the trigger as fast as I can. We're 325. 325 on the faster fire rate. And again, smashing the trigger as fast as I can. We're gonna end at 430 on the non-faster fire rate. So could my placements be slightly off there? My timing be a frame or two off? Maybe, but I don't think that changes anything. I think it's pretty clear. Faster fire rate does in fact work on lever action rifles. So that debate is now over. It definitely works. Let's try another roll. For this one, we've got an assassin's crossbow. We're going to do extra damage to humans. We're going to replenish action points with each kill, and we have a chance to generate a stealth field when we get a hit. So this is kind of an interesting one. While I don't love the assassin's effect, it's a situational effect and human targets are already very, very squishy, so it's kind of unnecessary. I like the 2nd and 3rd stars. The crossbow is definitely a weapon that you're going to use in VATS because aiming down sights isn't very precise. So VATS is definitely going to be key for this, and replenishing your action points with each kill is going to make that much easier to do. Your hits generating a stealth field also fits well with this weapon. While you are silent with this weapon and it's designed for stealth, there's always the possibility that you'll be detected. So if you can generate a stealth field after you get a hit, that might help keep you a little bit safer. The assassin's effect, I mean, if you do want to just go human NPC hunting with it, I guess you can. There's also an interesting ramification here for PvP. So let's say you want a PvP with kind of a unique weapon, something like this where you're going to use it in VATS, replenish your AP, that's good. Extra damage to humans, that's good. There's still a damage cap for PvP, but in light of that, you know, this should get you at least to the damage cap, especially if you're sneaking. But the big one here is that you get to generate a stealth field after a hit. So when you're in stealth, when you have a stealth field generated, you can't be targeted in VATS. So that could give you a little bit of an advantage. Now, if you're already crouching, then theoretically you shouldn't be able to be targeted anyway, but maybe you're moving around a little bit. I don't know. Maybe you could use it to your advantage. Overall, there's very little PvP in Fallout 76 anyway. I'm just trying to think outside the box on how this could be a little more useful. Ultimately, interesting 2nd and 3rd stars, not very useful primary, and it's still a crossbow, which just isn't a very popular weapon, so let's move along. So now we've got this one's pretty good. Okay, we've got a 2-shot Hellstorm missile launcher with damage while aiming in a VATS critical meter that fills 15% faster. So the 2-shot effect on explosive launcher weapons is notoriously good, especially if you pair that with the new, with the updated Grenadier perk. You're going to get a really big explosion radius, so you can do a pretty solid amount of damage with this. Extra damage while aiming down sights is a nice little buff. Alternatively, if we want to use it in VATS, our critical meter can fill a little bit faster. So, you know, it would be nice to have both of those things synergizing, but getting one or the other is also kind of useful too. So this one's kind of interesting. The only thing that sucks about it is I'm on my stealth commando character, not my heavy gunner. So this would be one that actually it could be kind of interesting to test this without a perfect build. So maybe it could work well for that. I don't know. We'd have to see. Once we get through this installment of Old Man McRib quests, there's 2 left. Once we get through that, I'll get back to some weapon testing. So don't you worry about that. We'll get back to it. And this might be one we take a look at. I'm not sure if I'll do a secondary build to do it as a heavy gunner or just play with it without a proper build and see if it might still be decent. That might be a more interesting way to use it. But this one's definitely a pretty solid roll. Let's keep moving. And next up is a Suppressor's explosive submachine gun with 15% faster reload. So, I don't love the Suppressor's effect. There just aren't a lot of things that really call for it in Fallout 76. Sure, if you and your friends are in a boss fight and one of you is using it, it'll give you a little more survivability, I suppose, but it's really not that hard to stay alive in Fallout 76. Where a weapon like this would come in handy is if you had a boss that has, say, multiple stages to the fight, where maybe there's one stage where you can't damage it, but it can damage you, and somebody could lay down suppressing fire. I guess in theory you could use that at the Imposter Sheep Squatch, but she's usually killed so quickly that it's not really necessary. But, you know, maybe if there were some other kind of boss fight that had some more strategic elements to it, then maybe you'd get a little more mileage out of an effect like this. But as it stands, it's just not very useful in the Fallout 76 we have today. Bullets exploding for area damage is always a nice bonus. That gives you some extra damage and, of course, area of effect damage, so not a bad thing to have. Faster reload, also not bad. The reload on this weapon isn't particularly slow to begin with, but if we can speed it up a little bit, nobody's going to complain about that. So overall, like the 2nd and 3rd stars, 1st star, not so much. Maybe at some point in the future we'll have a more realistic use case for that effect. And now we've got a more interesting drop. Okay, so Juggernauts, replenishing action points with each kill, and 250 damage resistance while aiming on a Radium Rifle. So this is an interesting roll, not necessarily a good one, but interesting. So the Juggernauts effect, one of the new legendary effects in the game, gives people who want to run at full health a damage buff. Unfortunately, it's only a 25% damage buff. So it really doesn't stack up against a lot of the other things in the game. Bloodied far outpaces it, Junkies outpaces it, Aristocrats, anti-armor, all of these things are going to outpace this effect. And I'm sure the thinking there is, well, you're not at risk like you are with Bloodied, but even still, I feel like we could do a little better. 25% damage. At this point, the developers they're just being really stingy with damage, and I don't really understand why. As long as we've got explosive energy legacy weapons floating around out there in everybody's hands, I don't really see what the point is of being this stingy on damage. So let us have a little bit of fun. Take the training wheels off and let us have a little bit of fun with some damage. But I digress. Replenishing action points with each kill on a weapon like this is very useful. It's one that you're likely to be using in VATS. The Radium Rifle is a really snappy, kind of harsh recoil weapon, so using this in VATS versus aiming down sights makes a lot of sense. Damage resistance while aiming doesn't hurt, but again, you're probably not really going to be free aiming this thing. It's going to be more of a VATS weapon, so that's probably a bit of a lost effect. Unfortunately, it's a Radium Rifle, and while they look cool and sound cool and are cool, it's so hard to get mods for them. It makes no sense. The game's been out for almost 3 years. This is a widely known issue that I have scrapped. I've built and scrapped hundreds of Radium Rifles, and I still don't have the Suppressor mod. It's nuts. There's no reason for it. The weapon is not some kind of all-powerful god-tier thing. That needs to get fixed. Let's see what's next. And this is definitely an improvement over pretty much everything at this point. We've got the Aristocrats handmade with VATS hit chance and 90% reduced weight. So Aristocrats is another one of the new legendary effects. It gives you up to a 50% damage buff if you are over 29,000 caps. For most, or maybe I shouldn't say most, but for many endgame players, maintaining a cap count over 29,000 isn't particularly challenging. You're probably doing it anyway. So getting an extra damage buff for that is awesome. If you want to run at full health, this is a viable option. It's better than Juggernauts by far. Your 50% VATS hit chance, another excellent secondary effect on a weapon like this. When you're talking about an automatic rifle or even a single shot rifle, the key to 50% VATS hit chance isn't just that it makes it easier to hit. It makes it easier to hit weak points. Heads on most NPCs, bellies on Deathclaws, different points on different robots. So by increasing the chance to hit, you increase the chance of getting bonus damage for hitting those locations. So 50% VATS hit chance isn't just about making VATS easier. That is a damage buff. Make no mistake about it. If you're a VATS player, that is a serious damage buff, and it's very, very valuable. 90% reduced weight. I don't mind this effect. Once you get some mods on the weapon, you're not truly going to be 90% reduced anymore, but it's still going to be lighter than it otherwise would be. And for a rifle where you have no perk cards to reduce the weight of rifles, that can be very useful. So this is a solid roll all around. Definitely a fan of this one. We got a couple more to try. Let's see what else we can do. All right, and now we've got a Suppressor's M79 grenade launcher with VATS critical hits doing more damage, and our hits have a chance to generate a stealth field. So we talked about the Suppressor effect a couple minutes ago. I'm not going to go deep into that one. It's not ideal here for the same reasons it wasn't ideal there. This one's kind of interesting, though. Here we've got VATS critical hits doing more damage and a chance to generate a stealth field. So normally you would think maybe you would run this with a heavy gunner, but this isn't really a heavy gun. It's an explosive launcher. So could we use this with a stealth rifleman character? It would be interesting. This might be one worth testing out once Old Man McRib is finished with his current run. So VATS critical shots doing more damage. If you've got a rifle, a VATS rifleman build or VATS stealth commando build, you're going to get a lot of critical shots. So that could be useful for some extra damage. Having a chance to generate a stealth field is also interesting. Maybe we want to back off from our targets a little bit and try and stay hidden. Maybe that stealth field helps us do that. I don't know. I haven't played around with these a lot, so it could be an interesting thing to try out. I don't love the primary effect, but the second and third stars kind of incentivize maybe a little bit of a more creative play style than we might be used to in Fallout 76, so it might be worth a try. This one's kind of interesting. I think under normal circumstances, you look at it and just assume Scrip, and that's probably what it is, but it might be fun to play with for a little bit. Let's see what else we can get. And now we've got another Radium Rifle. This one is a 2-shot with last round in the magazine dealing double damage, or a chance to deal double damage, and 25% less VATS AP cost. So I'm not a huge fan of the 2-shot effect outside of 2-shot explosive. For whatever reason, 2-shot explosive seems to be more effective than it looks like it should be on paper. Regular 2-shot, though, isn't. It's basically a 25% damage buff, and that damage gets divided between 2 projectiles. When you see them hit in VATS, the 2 numbers stack up on top of each other. From everything I can tell, they are equal damage per projectile. I've heard some people tell me that that's not correct, but when you look at the damage numbers on the screen, it's very obvious. So that's how they work. And unfortunately, what that means is the damage per projectile is lower, which means it has a harder time beating your enemy's armor. So you kind of lose out a little bit with just that 25% buff without the explosive effect. That's why I'm not a huge fan of it. You also suffer an accuracy penalty, and that's no fun. If you are aiming manually, it means you can sometimes miss with that second projectile. So this is why I'm not a huge fan of 2-shot without the explosive effect. 25% less VATS AP cost, definitely useful. This is definitely a VATS type weapon. It's we mentioned it on the other one. It's a really snappy recoil weapon, so much more comfortable to use it in VATS than aiming freely. Unfortunately, our second star here again is last round in the magazine, has a 25% chance to deal double damage. That effect is just boring. It's not even boring, it's just really not well thought out. So you might end up with that on a heavy gun. A heavy gun that holds 75 to a few hundred rounds in its magazine. And, your 1 in 4 chance there goes up way, way, way through the roof. You're never going to get anything out of that. On a weapon like this, if we're running, say, the Stinging magazine, it's 25 rounds in the magazine, which means if we have a 1 in 4 chance, that's a 1 in 100 rounds chance of dealing double damage, which just isn't all that impressive. And then on top of that, this is not a weapon that you usually allow your magazine to fully deplete. You're usually going to do a tactical reload. So you fight, and then once you have a second, you reload. It's actually very, very rare that you'll even fire the last round in the magazine. So what's the point of this effect on most of these weapons? On heavy guns, you probably will fire the last round in the magazine, at least most of them, but you've got so many bullets before you get there that it's pointless. With this one, you're never going to fire it anyway, unless you're talking about a weapon that only holds a few rounds in the magazine or is a single shot weapon, which that effect's not even supposed to drop on. This is a dead on arrival effect. At best, it should be a 3rd star. It definitely shouldn't be taking up the 2nd star slot. That's really, really disappointing. It just dilutes the pool of effects. So I'd quite honestly love to see it disappear right along with bashing damage. Now we've got 2 left. Let's see what we've got now. We've got Goremonds with faster fire rate and faster movement speed while aiming on a 10mm submachine gun. So 10mm submachine gun is a pretty fun weapon to use if you want to be a non-stealth commando. There's no suppressor for it. Despite the fact that it kind of looks like it has one on it, there is no suppressor for it, so you can't go quiet, you can't go stealthy. It's got a pretty good fire rate to begin with, but increasing that by 25% is going to really increase its DPS. Faster movement speed while aiming. If you happen to not have the speed demon effect, then that doesn't hurt you, but it's not a bad thing to have. But if you have speed demon effect, then you're already moving as fast as you can, so you don't really get anything out of that. But let's talk about the Goremonds effect. This is another one of the newer legendary effects. People like it, they think it's cool because it's new. The reality of it is it gives you up to a 24% damage increase. And the way that breaks down is you get 12% per hunger or thirst meter. So if your hunger meter is full, there's 12. If your thirst meter is full, there's 12 for a total of 24. That's not a lot of damage. It's right there with Juggernauts. So there's so many things that outclass it that I'm just not sure it really stacks up. Plus, those hunger and thirst meters can trickle down fairly easily, where you're going to lose some of that buff. Where I see this effect being more useful is on a melee weapon. There's lots of foods that you can eat to increase your melee weapon damage, but there aren't a lot of foods you can eat to increase your ranged weapon damage. So maybe putting all those things on quick select buttons or on your quick select wheel, then if you have a melee weapon, then keeping your food bar full also gives you incentive to kind of spam all those things that also boost your melee damage. So maybe it's a little more useful there than on a ranged weapon, but I don't love it on a ranged weapon. It's outclassed by way too many things. Faster fire rate, however, increases our DPS. That's solid. Maybe you get something out of faster movement speed. Ultimately, this is more of a VATS weapon. The 10mm submachine gun, much like the Radium Rifle, is a very snappy, heavy recoil weapon. So using it in VATS is usually the preferred method, but everybody's different. Your mileage may vary. Yeah, so I like the weapon, just don't love that primary effect. And now we're on to our last roll of the day with another Goremonds. This one's a 44 pistol with exploding bullets, and it breaks 50% slower. So here's another great example. Love the 2nd and 3rd stars. Exploding bullets, always good. Extra damage, area damage, always something we want and we want to take advantage of. Breaking 50% slower, that's an effect that's near and dear to my heart. I hate weapon degradation in this game. I think it's awful. I think it serves no purpose whatsoever other than being annoying and providing an excuse for Bethesda to sell repair kits. It adds nothing to the game. It's not fun. I say get rid of it. It's inconsistent. It seems to break every update. Anyway, that's I'm getting off my soapbox now. But so yeah, so I like the breaking 50% slower effect because I don't like fixing things. So that's a great one for somebody like me. Goremonds, just like with the last weapon, it's underpowered and it's outclassed compared to other things. But if you are a pistol build, if you maybe don't have a great revolver and you want to be a revolver build, then maybe this is a good weapon, at least for a little while. Personally, when it comes to revolvers, I think the only way you can really do serious damage with them is if you can suppress them. And there aren't a lot of revolvers you can suppress. The only one really is the pipe revolver. So this weapon is going to be outclassed by that one simply because you can suppress it and sneak with it. So that's kind of a shame. I'd like to see some creative way to do something more with these or just increase their damage all around. But overall, good second and third stars, disappointing first star, mildly disappointing weapon unless it's just the kind of thing you're into. And that is going to do it for this one. So we had another trip to Mama Mumbles. We got a couple of interesting things. Definitely not the best trip ever, but we got a couple of interesting things to play around with in the future, so I can't complain too much. But with that said, sometimes that's how it goes. Sometimes we win, sometimes we lose. You never know until you try. So with all that said, it's time to wrap this one up. I do hope you had a good time with this. I always do. And I hope I see you next time. Remember, if you did like it, go ahead and subscribe, hit the like button, leave a comment, follow me on Twitter. There's always a lot more to come on the channel. Friday of this week, we'll have another legendary crafting video. There'll be streams as there normally are throughout the week. And then next week, we should be back on track with Old Man McRib. He's got 2 more quests to do, and then we'll move on to other things in Fallout 76. So, without further ado, have a wonderful day or evening or night, depending on where you are, and I hope I see you all next time.